Two, one. Hello, everybody. This is Yogi Bryan Talks. I have Dr. David Snyder here. He is one of my favorite teachers, probably all-time favorite. We got him here. David, how you doing?
Good, Brian. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to kind of chew the fat with you for a little while and share some cool stuff, and that hopefully goes out to a lot of cool people and see where it takes us.
Yes, cool stuff. You're like the chief of cool stuff. I mean, I started on your YouTube, and then I'm like, what else does this guy know? Like, he's just like, your credentials are just like, it's like I needed to print it out double-sided, man. I was looking at your credentials. So awesome.
It's interesting that it's interesting that you mentioned that, because whenever people ask me what I do or what my background is, I'm always hesitant, because the minute I start listing off the credentials, they think I'm either full of shit or I'm trying to compensate for something. I'll let you figure out which one that is. But fun factoid, because one of the questions that you sent ahead of time that we were going to talk about was, what is something about me that a lot of people don't know? Goes right to my that long list of stuff. I'm a neurolinguistic programmer. I've been a neurolinguistic programmer for a long, long time. And so I learned how to model people. I learned to look at what's the difference that makes the difference, who are the people that are achieving what I wanted to achieve. And early in my life, I ran across a rather colorful character in the martial arts and personal development field. His name was Dr. John LaTourette. Now, if you think my credential list is long, you should see this guy's. When I first encountered Dr. LaTourette's teachings and his methodologies and things like that, my resume like fit on a business card, right? And then I just started to model a lot of his mindset, a lot of his approaches. And turns out we have a lot of similar personality traits. And I have this voracious desire for information and for integration of things. And so over time, my list of things that I was voracious about and I wanted to dig deep into just started to expand. And actually, I leave a lot of stuff off of that list because people just wouldn't believe where I'm going, because this is what I do. I mean, when I'm not sharing things with you, I want to know more, because I always want the next best thing. I want the next level, and one of the things that you find out being in the personal development field like you are and things like that is every time you reach a new plateau, you see the next one, and you're just not satisfied until you've gotten to that. And it's always that upward climb. And so I never stopped to really think about all the credentials I was accumulating after a while, because it was all about the skill sets. It was all about the information and what you could do with it, And so that's kind of how it evolved. It's the laundry list of stuff is just a trail of breadcrumbs on my personal journey to figure out the truth with a capital T in a way that we can apply it and make our world and our lives what we want it to be.
Yes, the truth. And I love, and you've said this before in your classes and on your YouTube, that, you started to learn this stuff for you. Like, it was all for you. And then you started sharing it with other people after like you mastered it and learned it. And that's what I really like. I resonate with that, because I'm the same way. It's like, I'm learning this stuff to like heal me, make me feel better. And then I can help other people feel better as well. What was the start? Like, what happened? Like, what was like the rabbit hole that, that one door that you opened where you're just like, whoa, okay, I'm on this journey.
I think the big one, after I made the decision that I was going to become irresistible. And when I mean irresistible, I mean the ability to influence whatever situation I was in. Okay, whether that's romance, whether that was business, whether that was my social life, school, what have you. Probably the biggest two pieces really for me was when I discovered hypnosis. Hypnosis was that tipping point for me when I realized there was another side to human beings that was largely not understood, not explored, but was filled with power, was filled with immense potential, and was the key really to unlocking your potential, to making the kind of changes I wanted to make and in all the different contexts that I wanted to make it. And so that kind of started me on this path of, okay, there's this thing called the subconscious mind, and it's where all of our stuff is, and we can use it to do things and get better at things and get, and then I, along the way, I discovered neurolinguistic programming, which happened right around 20, 21 years old. I discovered a book called Unlimited Power, like so many people did at the time. It was my first introduction to this whole field. And it just resonated with me so powerfully. And so I couldn't let go of it. It's like, no matter where I went, I was always like, how do I switch this? Or how do I, how do I break this down into things? And I didn't know at the time that would be such a pivotal part of my life. Because at the time I was working undercover security for a local retail store. Yeah. And I just happened to be cruising through the book department. And I found the book, and it had 2 words, unlimited and power. And that was like, that was me right there, And so I started looking for ways that I could apply it. And sometimes I found what I was looking for. A lot of times I was frustrated, like really frustrated, because there was all this amazingly cool information in the books. But when I went to apply it in the real world, I couldn't make it work. I couldn't make the transition from what was in the book to real world applications. And that became like the driving force for me. Was that old saying where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Well, my Snyder sense was tingling like left and right. And I was like, okay, there's a big gap here. This stuff seems to work in my head and it seems to work in the book. How do we get that into the field? And so that became my obsession, I guess, really, was to find a way to solve the problems of both in myself, but also in applying the things I was learning. Because in my world, if all I can do is read about it and I can't use it, it's fucking useless, And so, coming from a background where I was always bullied, where I was lied to, socially awkward, and always the last one to be picked or invited to any party, my social skills were lacking, to say the least. These particular skills were exceptionally appealing to me because I could see how they could help, but there was nobody out there teaching me how to use them for those applications. And I'd spent a lot of years trying to help myself and investing a lot of time and energy and finding those little golden nuggets, as I like to talk about, that give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's like a lot of practice, right? Just going out there and
huge
stumbling and like being awkward and
I was always my number one guinea pig. If there was a technology or something, I would watch what other people did and I would learn from their mistakes. That was one thing that I became very good at as I got deeper and deeper into the martial arts, into the hypnosis world, the NLP world. I started being able to learn by observing and learning by investigating and reverse engineering things. We spent enough time being properly trained in NLP, you stop listening to what people say as much as you watch what they do. Because many times what they're telling you they're doing versus what they're actually doing are actually very different. And so because of the martial arts background that I had, and because that particular field of application was working on the premise that everything about martial arts that we were taught was a lie. That all the movements and the forms. I showed you a little bit of the demonstration.
Yeah. Those demonstrations where I was just like in awe.
Right. Where I showed you what the forms actually mean versus what we're taught they mean and things like that. And so I was indoctrinated very, very deeply into that mindset from the martial arts, that what we were taught versus what they actually are very different. And because I could see the truth of that, I started, and because of my background in NLP, especially because everything about NLP is about learning how people process and structure and observing things that most people don't. So they kind of dovetailed in that area. And I just started reverse engineering everything that I encountered when I would go to a training or a seminar and I saw something that worked, my little flag would go off and I would go into that mode of deconstructing and reconstructing and seeing, okay. And then I would test it in various ways. Like they say, you have to do X, A, B, C, D. I would do CBDA and see if it would work. Right. And that's where I discovered that a lot of the things in classical hypnosis that we were taught weren't actually true, because there was just something that the teacher passed on to a student because he got it from his teacher or her teacher, and they never bothered to question it. They never bothered to test it. And so I spent a lot of time calling bullshit. and just coming in with what you're telling me is what you think is true. But let's find out what really works. And does it have to be done exactly that way? Turns out a lot of things don't. Some things are better done in a specific sequence than others. And so that's kind of the whole point of my life, was finding, okay, how do I optimize this? How do we apply it? And then once we have a functional solution, how do we optimize that? And
Yes.
from that process, patterns started to emerge. Patterns of thought, patterns of behavior, patterns of speech, patterns of mechanics. And you start to take a hermetics perspective, which is more along the lines of the higher self perspective and process and structure. And you start to see that these same patterns repeat at different levels of human experience. So like a demonstration I gave you in Las Vegas, where I basically took a guy's physiology and I actually just stood exactly the way he stood. And I dropped my knees a little bit and he crashed to the floor because he couldn't resist his own structure. Right? Well, that's just an example of the law of correspondence and the law of vibration. Like attracts like communicates with like. It's a biomechanical example, right? That has to have a connection for that to take place. But the more like that person I became, the more there was no separation between self and other. And so I didn't try to throw him to the ground. All I did was dip it. He went someplace he couldn't fall, or he couldn't maintain his structure, and he followed me there. I didn't do it to him. Right. And that's the same idea, when we're talking about NLP, like rapport and getting into sync with people and things of that nature. It's the same principle. It just manifests at a different level. When we're doing yoga, and I'm not sure which styles of yoga that you do, but you're looking at things like chakra work, you're looking at things like, pranayama. These are all special techniques to get resonance with a specific harmonic frequency. And when you do, phenomenon manifests, right? Whether that's a shift in consciousness, perspective, satori, enlightenment, samadhi, whatever it is that you're going for, the moment you hit that frequency and those things lock in, magic happens.
Magic does happen. And I'm so grateful for you on being on my journey, because I started as a yoga teacher and then got into meditation. And then I realized meditation, when I'm doing these guided meditations, I got into like brainwave states. And I'm like, wow, I'm becoming relaxed. These guides are relaxing me, and then they're putting stuff in my subconscious mind. And then I got into like sleep hypnosis, and then I found your YouTube channel, and then it just like totally opened a door to like, wow, the subconscious mind and hypnosis. And it really turned me on to NLP because, and I feel like the majority of people in the yoga community and just the community in general, it's like when I bring up hypnosis, like they've seen the movies and they think I'm going to do something to him. They're like, oh no, he's learning hypnosis. Like I need to put a shield on.
Yeah.
But when I talk to people about NLP, like they're very interested. They're like, oh, what is this neuro-linguistic programming? It seems like super scientific and cool, like a process, and they're more open to NLP. So just for like the newcomer, someone that doesn't really know about NLP, like how would you explain what NLP is?
NLP, the technical definition, is the study of the structure of subjective human experience. Now, what does that mean? It's the study of how we represent the world to ourselves in terms of pictures, in terms of feelings, in terms of sounds, in terms of smells and tastes. Because most of us, unless we've been living under a rock or living back in the 50s, have come to accept, however grudgingly, that we live in a vibrational universe. We live in a universe of vibration and local and non-local phenomena, quantum, to use the word. Movies like What the Bleep Do We Know that talk about this quantum universe. And so when we encounter a situation or circumstance, there's that primary experience, right? We're driving down the road. And no, I'm going to use a less than positive metaphor for this, but we're driving down the road, boom, we get T-boned by a car, right? Boom, perfect. Okay. Well, there's that original experience where we had a collision with some other vibrational phenomena, right? But what happens is the moment that we've had that experience, your neurology has to represent it to you in a way that you can interpret it. And so it takes all that information and just like white light through a prism, right? You take white light one side and 5 bands of color come out on the other, right? Well, the nervous system takes that primary experience and refracts it into 5 channels of information that it symbolically uses to represent the original experience. Because once you've had that experience, it's like, to use a colorful metaphor, like fart in a breeze, it's gone, right? All that's left is the recording that you made of it, right? And that recording is built out of 5 major building blocks: your visual representations, your auditory representations, your olfactory representations, and your gustatory representations. But they are metaphors. They are attributes and qualities, right, that your unconscious mind, your autonomic nervous system assigns to the internal movie that you've made of that experience. Now, NLP would call that an internal representation, which, again, the more syllables you add to a word, the more confusing it gets, right? It's a memory. It's an internal movie of something. But no matter whether it's a belief, a traumatic experience, a pleasurable experience, a fantasy, a daydream, whatever, you can't process the information outside of a visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory structure, both in your neurology, within your own head, and when you communicate it to the people outside of you. And NLP is the study of how that process happens in terms of functionally, what are we doing that creates a little software program in our head based on those 5 building blocks. And how is it helping us or hindering us by the way we've put it together? So one of the things that we like to do with people is what we call the frame game, which is where we say, look, you have this internal representation of a memory that you have and you relate to that memory like it's the real thing. Like when that car T-bones us, 10 years later, every time we think of it, we shudder because we feel like we're there again, but we're not. Why do we get that experience for something that happened 10 years ago? It was because of the way that movie was created, the way it was encoded, for lack of a better word. And NLP, from the inner working standpoint, is the study of how we did that. And once we understand how we did that, we now have the tools to go in and change it to something we want, something we like better. Because it's not the content of the memory, the story behind the memory, that is always the problem. Many times it's the way we encoded it, right? And so I call the VAKOG, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory phenomena, the primary encoding system. Because before we can even begin to think about and talk about any of our external experiences, we have to have that internal encoded experience for us to relate to, because we don't relate to the experience that we have. We relate to the recording we made of it. And it's the way we relate to the recording we've made of it, combined with how it's encoded to begin with, that determines whether it moves us forward, holds us back, traumatizes us, empowers us, what have you. And once you understand how that system works, you can go in and change it to whatever you want instead. And that's kind of where the study of NLP begins, and how we start to functionalize it. Now, what NLP also discovered was that keys to that little internal mind movie that we make come out in our spoken language. And by paying attention to a person's language, we can get and extract a literal map of what they're doing in their head, visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, olfactory, gustatorily. And then through languaging, we can indirectly influence it. Or if we want to be more direct, we can do what we do in Planet Davis, point to where you feel it, unpack it to that VAKOG capsule that you learned so much about, and just change it right there. Now, a lot of people in the classical NLP field are so focused on the linguistic side of it that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? And there's a lot of power in that side of it, but there's even more power, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of personal transformation in the primary encoding side of it, just going to the language of the nervous system and making the changes. And then your thought processes, your belief systems, and your perceptions of the world around you change spontaneously. Right. So I'm very direct.
I like can't believe like how it works. Like, just going to your training, is going to the class, and some of those deep sessions that you took us on. I'm like, I fixed like 17 different things I've been working on just like in a 10-minute. Yeah. I was like, how? And it took me a while to process afterwards, but I'm like, how did that happen? I'm like, wow. you know, I go back and the memory is like a different memory, and it's the voice there that's like, I had a new voice program. So it's just like, you know, and that's the cool thing with learning from you. It's like, you know, I hear something and I'm just like, that is not going to fucking work. No fucking way.
I've been doing this 20 years. I still get those moments. I look at that shit. I look at some brand new person right in off the street, spinning a pain from somebody who's had it for 20 years. And I'm like, that shouldn't work. That just shouldn't fucking work. And every time, right?
Yeah, I actually did I did one of the, you know, like the picture frame, put it behind you, throw it behind, far away. After the class, I went and did it to my dad. And like he told me, and this was back in January, and he came back and told me the other day, he's like, yeah, remember when you did that thing, you put it behind and then nailed it to the wall behind there? Like, it's gone. Like, it hasn't came back since. And he was like pushing back on it. He's like, oh, this stuff's not going to work or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Throw it behind you. So it's like, it was really cool. But everybody listening has to go to one of the classes to actually experience it. You got to go check it out.
It is. It's funny. It's funny you mention that, because on Instagram, I'm part of this little cabal of professionals. I just happened to meet on Clubhouse, and then we got together on Instagram to discuss various things. And one of the ladies runs a high-level coaching program. She's actually runs a coaching organization, and she was having some issues with. She wanted to understand more about values, and I asked her, well, I know a little bit about values. What's your question? And we went back and forth. And then I realized that she just needed an intervention. And so I literally, through the chat, did the magic frame on her. And just chats. I could literally cut and paste the entire chat, right? And then she nails it behind her. And then there's just this long pause. And then, holy, space, fuck. Because... And she says in the chat, I have watched this hundreds and thousands of times, and this is the first time I've ever done it. Holy shit. Right. And it was something that she'd been trying to, literally spinning her wheels on forever, because she was trying to address it from the wrong level of consciousness. Yeah.
And that's what's really cool. And maybe you can explain more about just how the body is, you know, when things are in front of you and then behind you, and how like the subconscious mind works. When you put stuff behind you, you step over things. Talk to people about that, because that's so fascinating.
Human beings in my world, again, as Richard Bandler's fond of saying about NLP, this is my hallucination, right? NLP is my hallucination. Yeah. Well, this is Planet David is my hallucination. If the model works for you, use it. When I talk about the subconscious mind, functionally what I'm talking about, even though we fully acknowledge the non-locality of the mind, that's just something we take for granted. But in the real world, we go with what we can touch, what we can point to in an anatomy book, and we work from there. You know, we work with what we know, what we can verify, and then extrapolate from there. And so one of the things that we know is that your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, does not speak English. It doesn't speak any spoken human language, but it does have a language. And it has to be a language that is so fundamental and so primal that every division can understand it, even if they can't interpret it properly, which is usually the problem, is that your autonomic nervous system is sending you information, and later divisions of that nervous system are mistranslating or misunderstanding what's being said. Okay. So human beings, from my perspective, have two kinds of coding systems that are derived from their neurology, from their autonomic nervous system. Okay, it's the interaction of their the vibration, the holographic aspect of the human being, the proprioceptive neurology, and mirror neurons. Okay, so when you listen to people talk about things, in my world, human brains and nervous systems are simultaneously literal, metaphorical, archetypal, and hierarchical. So you process all these different things simultaneously. And so depending on what your consciousness is and what you're focusing on or what you're looking for, you'll gravitate to one of those aspects, but you're doing all of them, right? Everything human beings do is an interpretation of vibrational data. It's literally a metaphor. And what is a metaphor functionally? It's a description of something in terms of something else, right? So I take this vibrational data that may be the energetic equivalent of ones and zeros, and I refract it into a visual representation and an auditory representation and an olfactory representation and a gustatory representation. And then to put it all together in a way that makes sense to the next level of my nervous system, I'll put it together to make a movie. And once I have that, I'll start to discern, as I become aware of the movie that I've created, I'll try to figure out, okay, what came first? What came next? Right? What caused what? And what does that mean to me? And then all of a sudden, all these other layers get added to that initial VAKOG movie that we've created, right? But there are two kinds of coding systems that I have discovered. One is the one that NLP talks about, which is what we call a personal encoding system. So, for example, NLP will say some people are primarily visuals. Some people are primarily auditory. So they listen first and then they make a picture and then maybe they get a feeling and whatever. Some people look first and they talk to themselves and then they get a feeling. Some people are kinesthetic. They get a feeling first, then they get visual, then they get auditory. You know, so there's a sequence of these brain areas that we stimulate and process information through. And that's largely an individual process. And a lot of it is very context dependent. And so the way you code for a particular experience may be radically different from the way I code for the same experience. You may be a KOG, I may be KOGV, right? Same experience, but we code it differently because that's what those things mean to us. However, what I've discovered is that every human being is almost, a little frame like that, comes off the assembly line a certain way. Right.
Yeah,
that personal coding system that I just talked about is something I believe you develop over time based on the inheritance from your parents and things of that nature. But I also believe that there are certain default settings that every human being has. And there's much less variation in those default settings. And so we direct a lot of our change work to those key areas that are default on most humans. And the ones that you work with the magic frame is this idea of forward versus rear hemispheres. I don't know if it helps your people for me to share my screen and show them a diagram or not, but
sure. Yeah.
If you can give me permission to share the screen, I'll go ahead and throw something up for you.
Do that. And if you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, better watch this on YouTube, everybody. Let's see here. Just gonna make co-host. I think that'll work.
All right, we can do that. So let me go ahead and throw this up, bro. Not throw up literally, but
yeah.
Let's see here. Programming your future. This will work. Okay. So let me go ahead and share this, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure.
All right. Maybe that's not what I wanted. Hold on a second. Where are you? There it is. Okay. So this is I use this particular diagram quite often. All right. So if you were to go to like a website like heartmath.org and you asked to see a map of the heart-centered nervous system, it would look like this little torus here. And I think we're a lot like these intersecting tori here, but that doesn't really help us in terms of understanding how we sort for experience. So I'm going to share with you the map I created. I'm going to just erase some stuff here so I'm not confusing people. And this is a concept I call the proprioceptive grid. So you notice that there's a blue line here. And this blue line represents the line of demarcation. It represents the spinal cord, or if you're coming from the Taoist perspective, the Tai Chi pole. You could also consider it the Sushumna from yoga, right? There's an axis that passes through the spine. And this is the line of demarcation. There's actually two lines of demarcation. When you, let me make this a little bit thinner so I don't overwrite everything. So anything out here, you're disidentified from, you're not associated with, okay? But anything that's in your forward hemisphere of your body, your neurology treats it like a file that's open and active and running. Just like when you open when you go to your desktop and you have some files that are open and they tend to overlap or close or cover others. The way we organize our personal experience is through little filing cabinets out in the space in front of us.
Okay. And is that 8 feet in front of you? Like
up to, well, the studies show anywhere between 3 and 8 feet.
Okay.
And honestly, I think depending on your level of energetic development, things of that nature, that field can go even further. It's just what we've been able to sense with instruments, right? And the one thing that's important to remember about that field is that it's more like a membrane that is passing information, just like a cell passes things through it to the inside out and from the outside in. This vibrational matrix that surrounds us is a two-way communication grid, but it's also a vibrational filing cabinet for where we store and project our experiences. So when people gesture, right? For example, when people are talking, you notice they move their hands a lot. And a lot of times they'll say things like, I got this thing, it just keeps nagging at me. I wish I could put my finger on it, right? And you'll see them just twirling, and you ask them, you talk about something else from this, you ask them the same question, so like, yeah, it's got to fit, and the hand will go to the same spot every time. Why? Because the interoceptive division of your nervous system is working with the exteroceptive division of your nervous system, and you're getting this two-way communication and information processing. Your hands are actually one of the most primal and original forms of communication that you have. The only thing that takes up more space in your brain than your hands is your eyes. Okay, so and you asked the question later about mudras. We'll circle back to that.
Yeah, that's when we interact.
When we interact, the hands are the way we express our will in the world. And so when our hands start to move in these strange, bizarre, unique gestures to us, we think they're random, but they aren't, because they're going to a specific spatial location and they're doing specific activities. Why? Because that's the language of the body, the language of the autonomic nervous system. It's how you process. You process from the inside out and the outside in. Okay. And so, but functionally speaking, every experience that you have has a corresponding location somewhere in the space in front of you. And so you can access that by asking your body certain questions. But one of the things, and you learn this in Identity by Design, we'll go over it again in regression, things of that nature. One of the things that we want to do is we want to stack those connections. We want to get as many different on-ramps to that information from as many different divisions of the nervous system as possible. So how do we do that? We call it point and click therapy. You point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it, right? And again, going back to this diagram, when you reach out and touch it, that spatial location is connected to that internal body feeling. Now, if I make any change here by making it bigger, making it smaller, right? For most people, their default setting is if you make it bigger, it gets stronger. If you make it smaller, it gets weaker, right? Most people's default setting, if you make it and you pull it closer to the body, it gets more intense. Now, this goes back to what we were talking about. You have two boundaries that your nervous system demarcates. You have the boundary of the body itself and the spine. As this picture, let me make a nice, cool picture for everybody to see.
And that picture that you reach out to, like, I'm thinking it's almost like a browser, right? It's just kind of like chilling there, like a browser on your phone. And you're just like, okay, that's where that energy is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. Because human beings always create technology that matches or models what they do with their neurology. But you got to remember, who came first, human beings or cell phones, right? Who came first, human beings or touchscreens, right? This idea that human beings are, this is why we call these, I'm sorry, oops, that was not what I wanted to do. So let me make sure I can move this. So once again, if I take this internal representation and I move it away from the body, it's like turning the volume knob down. It gets less intense. We're less connected to it. It's more imminent. It's less imminent, for lack of a better word. As it moves closer and closer to the body, the intensity level, the volume at which our nervous system plays that experience goes up until it passes the border of the body. And then NLP would say we've now become associated into that. So many times when you take some of these pictures out in space and you wrap them around the body, it's now you've gone from seeing yourself in the picture to like a first person video game. It's like you're in it now, right? But it's still
Yeah.
present. In other words, because it hasn't passed the line of that spine, your neurology still classifies it as something that's happening. But the moment that internal representation, the moment you start moving that picture beyond the boundary of the spine, it starts becoming classified as over, done, and complete. And the further away from the body it goes, the less impact it has, until it has no impact. And so that's literally how your proprioceptive neurology impacts how you experience something. When people think about something that bothers them, they almost never point behind. In fact, they never point behind them, right? But the moment you take something that's bothering them and you move it behind them, it doesn't affect them anymore.
Which is so simple. Like, it just blows my mind that
well, that's the problem. Is it's so simple,
so well,
because it's so primal, it's so foundational, and below the surface of what we're consciously paying attention to, that we don't realize it's something that actually influences us to the degree that it does. But clues to it come out in our language, right? If people say, for example, let me just move this over here. Are you seeing this okay? Okay, good. So people have an issue in front of them. Your autonomic nervous system treats these vibrational containers like solid objects, which is why you'll hear people say, I just got to get past this. Well, if I get past something, where does it end up?
Behind you.
Exactly. I said, I just got to get over this. Well, if I get over something, where does it end up?
Yeah, behind you, stepping over it.
All right.
Yeah.
I got to put this behind me. Where does it end? Right? Where does it end up? There are clues, and this is what NLP is telling us, is that there are clues in our spoken language that tell us how we're doing things in our own heads and bodies. And if you understand what to pay attention to, you can follow those trails as breadcrumbs and inject change. Now, I go right to the point, is everything that human beings do is a result of this VAKOG sequence. Right? And regardless of whether you start with a visual or you start with an auditory, ultimately, everybody at the end of the day defaults to kinesthetic. It's either a body feeling or a body action or behavior. So my thought was, well, shit, if everything human beings do results in a feeling or is caused by a feeling, why don't we just start there? And what's the most direct route to a body feeling? Well, it's the body, right? And this was one of my big discoveries, is that this concept of what we call somatic address, is that for every psycho-emotional issue that you're dealing with, whether you're conscious of it or not, there is a location somewhere in the body where those feelings are reconstructed and expressed. And since all the aspects of the nervous system come together at that one point to reconstruct the experience, then by definition, it's also connected to all the areas of the body that are holding that experience. So if I start to create change at that spot, and then do it in such a way that all the divisions of the nervous system are engaged and communicating effectively towards a common goal, I can get a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts, and I can reach every part of the system that is affected by that information. Now, it sounds a lot more complicated than the application is. Point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it, make it bigger, make it smaller, make sure you got the right one, white it out, write the lessons, shrink it down, move it behind you. Boom, done. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so simple and it works so crazy well.
Yeah. So that's kind of, but again, this idea that everybody does it different is true enough to be true, but it doesn't really help us make change easy. But if we understand that every human being on the planet, and I have not met one yet, that this was not true for, it doesn't mean there aren't some out there. I have not met one yet in front of them is open, active, and running. Behind them is overdone, closed. I have not met anyone who's reversed or not influenced by that. And so I call it.
It's all our neurology, right? Yeah.
And so while it's true enough to be true that each of us have developed and use our nervous, like we all have a computer and they're all largely built the same, but we all use them different, right? We organize them different. Our default settings are different. Those are all, but they come off the shelf the same largely. And so that's what I look for. What is the same and the simplest for human beings? And if we can insert change at that level, it generalizes, which is why a lot of times when you clear up something using this particular approach, all the meanings and the beliefs and the confusion about an issue, the perspectives that you shift spontaneously, because it's you've recoded the original representation of the experience, and so everything connected to it shifts automatically.
Yes, yes. I love this. I really love this stuff. Tell us, or tell the listeners that they haven't heard the story about how you like got the download about spinning. Like, I just love hearing the story. I've heard it several times. I love hearing it, and just so many people need to hear it.
Yeah. First of all, there's several people in the NLP world who have developed technologies based on this concept of spinning. And a lot of people think that I got it from Oberdorf or Richard Bandler, and I didn't. I developed my particular spin independently. In fact, I didn't even start studying directly with Richard until 2013. I got the download for the spinning technique in 2005. I know exactly where I was and what I was doing with it. I was in DeLand, Florida, at Omni Hypnosis Training Center, being run by Jerry Kine, the one of the grand masters of classical hypnotherapy. And there was this really, really gorgeous woman from Montreal that I wanted to impress. And so we're on a break. And I hear her complaining. Now, to this day, I get confused from time to time whether it was a migraine or a backache. We'll go with backache for right now. It could just have easily been a migraine. I was not focused on which pain it was, but be that as it may. And she goes, "Oh, my back hurts." And the minute she said, "Your back hurts," zoom, I got this freaking down like a bolt of lightning and a zip file unlocking. And I just said, "We'll point to where you feel it." She goes, "Huh?" I get, "Point to where you feel it." She points, and I say, now look at it. Look at the spot. I said, physically look at it. I said, "Now close your eyes." She closes her eyes. I say, "Now look at it with your inner eyes. Notice there's a color connected to that feeling. What's the color first impression?" She goes, "It's red." I said, "Reach in, grab all that red energy, take it out and hold it in your hands in front of you. Make sure you get it all," right? And so she reaches in, she got it. And I said, "As you look at it, did the color change or stay the same? First impression." She goes, "It stayed the same." I said, "Excellent. Notice it's moving. It's spinning in a certain direction. What direction is it spinning?" She goes, "It's spinning like this." I said, "Grab it with both of your hands." And I'm doing this right next to her. And I said, "Now I did this, and make it the opposite of what it was. Now double the spin, double the speed, double the force, double the magnitude. Keep doubling it over and over and over again until it takes on a life of its own, until it's impossible for it to go back the way it was. When you know you've got it, slam it back into that spot." She slams it back into her lower back. I clamp my hands over hers right as she puts it back in. She breaks out in this massive sweat. She's like, and I just held it for like 30 seconds, right? And then she like, there's always this sigh when it kicks in. They're like, right? And as soon as I felt that, I let go. I go, "Scale of 0 to 10, rate the remaining feeling." She goes, "It's gone." I said, "Cool, see ya." Right? Because I was nervous. I ran out of shit to say, and I didn't know what to say. And the class was starting. I was doing it on break. But that's how I didn't know what I had when I was given it. And that's kind of going back to your mission in this life, is when the universe hands you something like that, it's not a parlor trick. The universe expects you to do something with that. And if you don't take the hint right away, the universe will give you progressively more and more loud and obnoxious hints until you get it and you actually do what you were supposed to do with it. It took me about 7 years to get the hint. And I wound up in China in a cancer ward. And the only techniques I had at my disposal were gray room and spinning. And I used them, and we had some amazing results. Not the result I wanted, but a very significant result that let me know that there was a lot more to this technique. And I spent the rest, from that moment to now, saying, what else can we do with it? How do we make it even better? What will this thing not make a dent in? And I will say this: the time I was out there doing the spinning technique in that cancer ward in China, the patient kept getting better and better and better, to the point where she was like pacing up and down the cancer ward like a samurai warrior, dragging her IV bottle behind her. It's like, and 3 days ago, this woman was a shriveled little husk in her bed. and they were just getting ready to say last rites and everything else. And she spoke no English, which was the one of the biggest problems. Is at that time I was a regression therapist, and everything I did was language based. I only had a couple of techniques that were minimal language oriented, gray room and spinning, and using an interpreter. Every system that wanted to shut down, we turned back on. From tachycardia to the fluid in the pericardium to shortness of breath. It was like there was a code that was facilitating how an organ behaved. And the moment we changed the code, the system played the new code.
That is fascinating.
And that was and so the spinning technique really became my Rosetta Stone for understanding, and my theory about holographic memory theory, what I call now holographic memory theory, which was a lot of it was later confirmed by my work with Brent Baum, who came at from the same idea with some completely different approaches and techniques that just blew my freaking mind. It was obviously we were pulling from the same source, but expressing it very differently. And so Brent's work just completely took us to a new dimension. And I've been very fortunate to be guided to people who have got some amazing technologies that almost nobody knows about.
Yeah, you find the coolest teachers and know the coolest books and things like that. Like I'm always like, every time I listen to you, like I listen to your YouTubes multiple times because I'll miss things.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, okay, that book, I need to get that book or do that. And that spinning technique, same thing. I was at Identity by Design in Vegas. I go use it on my dad. He had like back pain. His back pain went and was like almost gone. And he's just like, I don't know how you did that. He's like, some of these things you're learning, like, I don't know about it, but it's like they're working, you know, on someone that really doesn't believe that they would work.
That's the best part is the first time I ever heard that you don't have to believe it phrase was when I walked into a Reiki class. 1991, 92. I walked into my very first Reiki class.
What's your Reiki master, right? Just one of your credentials.
I've been a Reiki master since before Reiki was even cool.
That's awesome.
Fortunately,
yeah, because it's cool. It's cool now. Like everyone likes it.
Yeah. I actually, again, don't get me started on that rabbit hole, but the bottom line is one of the first things that the ladies doing it said, you don't have to believe in it for it to work. And I was like, really? Because most of us are coming from this faith-based, if you don't believe it won't happen kind of a shit. Well, some things work whether you believe in them or not, especially if you're taking a mechanics approach, which is what we do. So you don't have to believe it. You just got to do it. And if you do it, you're going to get a result, whether you believe it or not, right? The only thing we ask is that you don't actively work against it, right?
Try to make it not work, right?
Yeah, and that's usually what you'll see when it doesn't work is because people are actively trying to keep it from happening. And you can almost see the conflict in them because something's starting to engage and they're pushing back against it. So you always got to vet them a little bit, but by and large, they don't got to believe it. They just got to do it, and the more committed they are to doing it, whether they believe it'll work or not, the more rapidly it tends to work. Because the way we do it is through the body, which overwrites the critical faculty. The neocortex is the youngest, weakest part of the human being, but it's the part that screams the loudest, and it's the part that's closest to the surface. So we assume it's the strongest, but it isn't. The moment you get the body engaged in acting out the change work, every part of the nervous system starts to come online because, and this goes back to very, very old science. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between something that's vividly imagined and something that's real. Conversely, if you think about it, can it tell the difference between something that's real and something that's vividly imagined? Because if I start acting out of change, which is true, right? I'm tapping into that from both sides. So I eventually the activity of the body will overwrite the neocortex, because most people have a limited attention span and a finite amount of willpower to fight the power of the body. And we say in hypnosis, when the imagination and the willpower are in conflict, imagination wins, right? And for order for you to act out of change, you have to see it, which is your imagination, right? So, worst case scenario, you're going to get change. If you actively engage all of you voluntarily, you're going to get it faster and deeper, right? But you don't got to believe it. And that's the best part. You don't have to believe it. Just go ahead and do this and tell me what happens. And like,
just do it. And it's like, yes. And like, before I started practicing yoga, like I was trying to read a lot of self-help books and just try and like outthink my problems, you know, like if I gain all this knowledge and have it all in my head and like I'll know it, then I can change it. And it's not until I did yoga and then taking your classes where it's like, okay, I start with the body. You know, if I want to change my state or like I got to start with my body. And it's like, oh, I have this, like I'm not just like a head.
Exactly.
You know, I have this body that I can
blame the cart.
change. And that was yeah, talk about that, like the body, how like that, you know, just changing your breathing, changing your
let's think about it from let's think about it this way. Okay. You know, when we talk about hypnosis, okay, we talk about the unconscious mind. And this little download came to me years ago, and it's a little thing, but it made perfect sense. Then it makes even more sense now that we've been actually using it. Is what's the biggest piece, or what's the biggest part of your subconscious mind? It's your body. And functionally speaking, when you ever watch a hypnotist, who, by the way, hypnotists by and large are the most effective therapists on the planet in terms of the amount of time it takes to get a change, the scope of which they can get change. Hypnosis works. Even classical school, you know, where I come from, and then we evolved to our approach. Classical hypnosis and hypnotherapy has a ridiculously good success rate with most things. A lot of it's dependent on the practitioner, but you compare it to its closest competitor is CBT, and it doesn't even come close. It's not even in the same decimal range in terms of. But I can say I definitely agree to that, just because when I did Identity by Design, and I just wanted everybody to like hear this. When I did your 5-day Identity by Design, I wanted to do it just so I can get the certificate, you know, because I did your Identity by Design online, but I was just like, I want to go there and like experience it. I did not expect how much therapy like I got during that 5 days. Like it was way more value than what I paid for it, because I had like 100+ therapy sessions done on me. And I worked on so much of my shit. And then I was like hypnotizing other people. So I'm just like, wow, that 5 days was like, it was more value than my actual yoga teacher training. I just want to say that. Thank you for that.
More value and life-changing the amount of therapy I got. So it's like, yes, hypnosis like really does some deep changes.
Well, that's kind of the rub. And again, I don't mean to offend anybody who's gone through classical psychotherapy training. And it's not my intention to offend anyone. Everything works for somebody. Okay. I have a large impatience streak, as you can tell by the kind of techniques that I teach and how fast we get change. But there are some things that take longer than others, depending on, you know, the environment, the context, the kind of cognitive obstacles or filters a person has in place. But one of the things I discovered very early on, and I think this is largely true for the psychotherapy professions as well. In fact, I first learned this from the psychotherapy profession, was that the vast majority of people who go into psychology to fix their own shit.
Yes.
And the challenge for them is that they never actually do. And when they actually do wind up fixing their own stuff, they leave the profession because they're done.
Yeah, they're like,
what I discovered,
I feel good.
Yeah. What I discovered was a corollary with hypnotists, is that the vast majority of people coming to a hypnotherapy training are there to get certified as a hypnotherapist, but their real objective is to fix their own shit. And so I built the training around getting your shit fixed first as a byproduct of doing the work. So that now when you come out on the other side of the training, you know exactly in intimate detail what your client is going to be experiencing. And so you can guide them more expertly on that path. It's one thing to hand a guy a script and say, go hypnotize that person. It's another thing to be the person being hypnotized over and over and over again and having to deal with your own stuff and then guiding other people through their own stuff. It takes that learning and drives it deeper. But at the same time, when you come out of that 5 days, all the little quirks and eccentricities and things that would have come back to bite you in the ass, or maybe even, God forbid, lead you to abuse the skills you have, they're fixed.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and so the person who comes out on the other end of that training is healthier, they're more resourced, and they're more capable of helping other people to the degree they need help, and they're far less likely to abuse the power that they have.
Yes. Yeah, walking out of that class, you know, the last day, it was like before identity by design and then after. Like pretty much my life has been, and it took me like a month or two to like actually process everything and just being like, okay, why am I doing some of these things? Like how you said, you know, you kind of fix your shit and then you're just like reevaluating, okay, how am I going to use these tools that are just so powerful and help me out? So,
and it goes back to the thing we talked about at the very beginning of today's interview, was that self first. You're no good to the world damaged. You're no good to the world unresourceful. You're no good to the world broke or sick or unhealthy or sad. You know, how much do you want to share when you're all in your own fucking head and your life sucks, right? But the moment you feel like you've got abundance, the moment you feel like there's power that you have to make a change, to help people, again, you just want to give it. You just want to share it with the people because you know you can, because you know that in the process of sharing it, you don't lose anything, you gain it. Right? But if we're coming from that place where we're disempowered or we're broke or we're wondering where our next meal is going to come from, metaphorically or, you know, sometimes literally, but when we're coming from a place of disempowerment, but we're giving because our teachers and our preachers told us that to give is divine and godlike and all these wonderful things, and that there's nobility and humility in being poor and poverty stricken. And I don't buy into that. I think God put us here to be abundant, to move through the universe, growing and sharing that abundance. The Kabbalists say, you know, there's two ways to receive. There's desire to receive for the sake of the self alone, and there's the desire to receive for the sake of sharing. And I think that's kind of the people that we, you know, if your vessel, this vessel that you move through, if you hold on to what you have and never share, your vessel is finite. It can't hold any. It'll reach a certain point where it's achieved its tolerance, and now if you try to put more in, poof, a fuse is going to blow.
Yeah.
But when you're flowing energy through you, when you fill yourself up and then allow little ports into the universe to disseminate that, you can receive infinitely and give and share infinitely without ever depleting. And that's the whole model, the Kabbalah. And by the way, the only metaphysical discipline I ever saw taught in a Kabbalah center was Reiki. Because the model that they use, the mechanics of what they do are almost identical.
I've been like led to like learn more about Reiki, so I'm gonna do.
Well, again, I spent 30 years researching and deconstructing the evolution of Reiki as we know it in this country. Because you got to remember, Reiki was Japanese, and I was coming from this mindset of, okay, what didn't they teach us? What were they holding back? What did they misinform us about? And so I applied that same filter to my studies in Reiki as I did to the martial arts, and I found out some really interesting stuff.
Cool. Yeah. That's why your teachings are so cool, because you bring like so many different aspects and practices, and like using the stuff that actually like you use and work and work. You know, that's why it's so cool. How I'm getting to my like second outline question, because we've gone off, but this is like amazing stuff. Like for someone just starting to like reprogram their subconscious mind, like what do you recommend that they do if they're not like going to go full on like NLP or full on hypnosis? Like, is it affirmations? Like, how can they start reprogramming some of that junk in their head?
Well, I think the best and quickest way is what I call the transformational trio, the transformational triad, which is energy spinning, which is something we just went through in this, and magic frame, which is we also went through, right? In you know, big pictures. And the other one is what we call color breathing, which is understanding that for every body feeling that you have, you can translate that body feeling into a color or a series of colors. And if you just ask your neurology the right question, it will give you the information you need to change it. So if I point to something here and I say, well, if they had a color, what color would it be? The color might be purple. Okay. And if my unconscious mind, my superconscious mind could send me a feeling, a color, a vibration, a frequency that would completely dissolve that purple energy that's in my chest and give me exactly what I want instead, what color would it send me? First thing that pops into your head is the answer. You imagine a big ball of that energy floating above your head, fill the room with it, wrap it around you, breathe it through the affected area, and that area will start to dissolve. It may not go, one of three things will happen. That area will go away completely, best case scenario. A lot of times what happens is if the area is this big and you breathe that resolution color through it, it'll shrink. And then you ask, okay, what color is this one? And they say it's green, right? And I say, if my higher mind, my unconscious mind could send me a feeling, a frequency, a vibration that would completely dissolve away this green energy and give me what I most need and want instead, what color would it send me? It might say purple. Big ball of purple above my head, fill the room, wrap it around me, breathe it through that affected area. It shrinks down even more. Like peeling away an onion skin. I call that the Russian doll effect, right? Because you ever take these Russian dolls, you take the Russian off, there's another one inside until finally there's nothing left, right? Well, that's it's a very systematic, very progressive way. It takes a little bit longer than some of the other interventions, but it's really good because each of these is not the same issue. It's a different issue, right? And that's why it didn't completely resolve. The other way that it can manifest is I have an area here in my chest. I ask what color it is. It's green. They say what color would resolve it or send it away. I get purple. This one goes away and one pops up here. Okay, what color is this? Right? Oh, it's yellow. Okay, what color would dissolve it? Red. Okay, breathe red. Poof. Now it moves here. Right? And now this is called body mapping. It's like we're literally tracing the spider web of similar experiences through the body. So either way, you either get instant resolution, in other words, that shit goes away and doesn't come back, or it moves or it shrinks. You just wash, rinse, repeat until it goes away. And you can cycle through each of the transformational triad until you get full resolution. So maybe I point to where I feel it. I take it out, spin it, put it back in. It goes from a 9 to a 2. And now I either take it out and spin it again, and it goes completely away, or maybe it goes from a 2 to a 1 and take it out, spin it again, it goes to a 0.5, take it out, spin it again, goes to a 0, perfect. But sometimes you take it out, spin it, it goes to a 2, you take it out, spin it again, it stays at a 2. When it stays at a 2, it tells you that there's probably a safety lesson that the unconscious mind and the body is seeking to preserve. The technique custom made for that is the magic frame. So you point to where you feel it, you reach out and touch the picture, you trace the outline of it, you make sure it's the right one, white out the image, write the lessons on the screen, shrink it down, move it behind you, nail it back there, done.
Done, gone.
Right?
Gone.
Let's say there's a little bit left over. Okay, what color is it? Well, it's yellow. If my higher mind, my unconscious mind, could send me a feeling, a frequency, a vibration that would completely dissolve the rest of this away and give me exactly what I want instead, what color would it send me? White. Boom, breathe that white energy through there, poof. If there's anything left, point to where you feel it and just do whatever technique seems appropriate based on your intuition. And you just cycle.
Cycle, just like layers, cycle it all the way down. Just like, till it's gone. I love that. I love that. And do it, people. If you're listening, do it.
You don't have to believe it, just do it.
Just do it. It will work. It's awesome. And what's your current most powerful practice that you're doing, like yourself?
My current most powerful practice, in what context?
Just like your personal development. What are you learning next, or like what do you practice? And I know you mentioned mudras, and I really want to get into that. But it's like what
mudra work is a big part of my personal regimen, as is Kabbalistic meditation and integration. The thing I'm focused on big time now is a type of qigong known as golden shield.
Golden shield.
Golden shield is an internal form of iron shirt, where you learn to break bricks over your body and stuff like that. And so there's a whole body of up until recently some very lost information. And I finally found a guy whose teachings I trust, and whose American students can actually do this shit. We see a lot of again, I don't want to sound biased or prejudiced, but a lot of times these masters come over from China, they can do these amazing things, but they're the only ones who can. And to me, that's not good enough. I need to see your students doing those things. And I finally found a teacher whose students are doing the same amazing things he is. And they have an understanding of it, and they can talk about it eloquently and intelligently. They're obviously very dedicated to their teacher, and I am too, because I'm a very loyal person that way. But we've kind of become indoctrinated into this idea that anything that can be fake is. But sometimes real phenomena exist, whether it can be faked or not. And that's the dilemma that we're in. And that's why I do so many things for free. And just get up and demonstrate. Whenever anybody has a question, I just do something to somebody from the audience, because that clears up a lot of questions. You know, if you have a question or skepticism about something, and I pull your ass out of the audience and I fix your shit right in front of you, right? That has a significant impact, right? But so the golden shield stuff that I'm doing now is awesome. It's teaching me and giving me new understandings of things I've known about, but also I'm discovering that I can use the technologies that I have to accelerate the development of the classical Qigong methods that I'm learning, that have stood the test of time. Yeah. And so because I'm not patience is not my virtue. Relentless determination is, but I'm not yang wood, I'm yin wood. So while yang wood will just suck it up and be stoic and just move forward relentlessly, I'll move forward relentlessly, but I'll whine about it an awful lot. So people often assume that because I'm whining, I'm going to quit. I don't. I just take a breath and then I get up and I do it again.
Take a breath, that relentlessness.
Stoicism is kind of overrated in my world, but I get it. I get the importance of it. But the bottom line is my big practices right now are exploring the Jingui system and all the things that are beyond the golden shield level, because there's iron body, there's golden head, there's golden arms, there's other things that this is as advanced as that particular study is. There are also preparatory levels for other stuff. And I'm excited to see what's behind the curtain once I develop myself to the point where I can do these things. And eventually, once I can demonstrate, just like the people I'm learning from can do this, breaking bricks over their bodies and stuff like that, then those things in some form will find their way into my vibrational teachings and things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, if you can't produce a result in a timely manner, it's not worth learning, as far as I'm concerned. Because, like when we study martial arts, most people don't have 20 years to get good at fighting or protecting themselves, right? That's why I love the Filipino martial arts so much, is because their whole attitude is you got to learn to fight. You got to learn to fight today because you might have to fight tomorrow. And so the whole concept of the Filipino martial arts is drill based, and it's designed to be learned very quickly, which gives you a really good short-term foundation, which allows you to survive long enough to learn the long-term stuff. So I think there's optimal progressions for things, right? But that's the short answer is I'm studying the Jingui system right now, and I'm really happy with it. It's everything that I've experienced working on my own has correlated with what they've told me to experience, what happened later, without me prompting them. So I'm getting a lot of corroborations about things. And I'm excited about it. I'm never going to stop. Actually, I had one lady, you might remember her. Her name was Nadine. She actually stood up in class one day and says, can you slow down? Can you stop learning so we can catch up? And she's asked me that in 2 classes. And I looked at her and I said, no, because I'm hungry.
Right.
I started out hungry in my early teens and 20s to be a better version of me, to be all that I could be by my standards. And 50 years later or 40 years later, that hasn't changed. The difference is now is that I have things that are my go-tos that people who had similar problems to me can go to and get their stuff handled. And you never run out of the thing you gotta understand is you never run out of problems in life. You're never going to run out of problems. You just get a higher class of problem. And so my goal is to move you to higher quality problems, because that's what you came here for. You came here to solve shit.
I remember you said that. Yeah, you said that in one video or a class where you're just like, no matter how much you work on your problems, like there's always going to be more. Like
I had one student. His name was zero. I had one student. He was a young Israeli kid, and he was helping me with my website, my Unlimited Lover website at the time, and he was trading off the web work for classes. And he came up to me like right before class or during an intermission one time, and he goes, "David, I have a question." He goes, "I keep doing Gray Room, and every time I go back to Gray Room, I find more stuff. When will I be done?" And I looked at him, I said, "Never." He goes, "Never?" Because he thought there was an end to this, right? And there isn't. You just graduate to a higher quality of stuff you're dealing with. And I think that by and large, that's what the universe intended, right? We're all, time doesn't actually exist. So this idea that we're going anywhere faster or slower is just an illusion that we've created,
Right, right. I could probably talk to you for like 5 hours. Like this stuff is so fascinating, and you're just like a wealth of information. And that's what's amazing. Like you have so many YouTube free videos. You know, I started with the free videos, and I'm just like, man, I need more. I need more. So then I started doing like your online classes, and then I'm just like, I need more. And then I went to the actual in-person classes, and I was like, wow, you know, like that was, I didn't expect that. Like I knew it was going to be great, but I didn't expect like such a
most people don't.
change.
And when when they hear me say, and again, thank you for that, by the way. And I'm really grateful that you had that experience. And I strive very, very hard to give everybody that level of experience and to really exceed their expectations. You know, and when I talk to people online and I say, if you really want to get it, as good as our videos, as free content is, our paid content is even better. And as good as that paid content is, the live sessions are even more so. People think, yeah, David, right. And then they get in the room. And after like the first half day, like, holy shit. And it's literally like you're seeing the matrix, but not just seeing it, you're in the matrix and you're stepping in and out of it. And oh my God, you come out going, I know Kung Fu, right? And it's a very empowering experience. And many times you do come out of that thing feeling like I could fix anything. I don't know if that's literally true, but you certainly have tools that you didn't have going in.
I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt that. I was like, I like unlocked all these doors. Like, it's just crazy. Like you step out and you're just like looking at the world completely different. And it was a little bit overwhelming too. It's just like, just because I was able to see myself and just some of the perceptions I was putting out.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay, that's why people perceive me this way, because just my body language and what I'm putting out to the world.
And that's actually one of our first goals as a teacher. And I've said this in class, and I'll say it here. One of my jobs as an instructor and a guide is to help you to become more self-aware. Because without awareness, there is no choice. You know? And one of the ways that we gauge our level of consciousness is by what we're aware of and how we perceive it, and the frame that we wrap around it. And so if I can help you to become more aware and teach you how to become progressively more aware, I've given you the one tool that will allow you to progress without me: the ability to perceive, structure, and process, and extrapolate from it, right?
So powerful. It is like the awareness key of your training was like, wow, okay, I see it now. And now I can make a change. You know,
and you can't unsee it. That's kind of the suck part, isn't it? Is once you start seeing it, you like can't unsee it.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah. I was saying, like, every time I learn something from you, and then Bernie, that's one of your guys there, I'm like, I should pay you per like door you unlock for me. You know, it's like, cool.
Bernie's got some
Here's
stuff.
The payment.
Bernie's got some amazing stuff. In fact, I can see not too long in the future where I'm going to his seminar, because where he specializes in the pond he plays in is so parallel but different from the things I'm doing, and yet they're so complementary. And the stories he tells about house clearings and getting rid of entities and some of the people he's studying with right now, I'm like, I'm coming to your seminar, and I can see that happening in the not too distant future. So I'm glad
exactly.
I'm glad he's
everybody listening, I'm creating FOMO for you. Like, you have to go to David's events. You have to meet Bernie to experience it. So this is, we are leaving things out on purpose. So you can come. But one last question. I really want to get back to Mudras, because I heard you talk about Mudras. I bought Mudra books. I'm doing it in my meditations. I'm doing like this one, I guess, like this one. What I fixes a lot of things. And I feel it. Like, I feel it. And I felt like universe change that way. So like, why Mudras? Why is it so powerful for you?
Well, think of it from purely physiological and anatomical standpoint. At the beginning of the interview today, I said, the only thing that takes up more bandwidth, more real estate and surface areas of the brain than your eyes, or as your eyes, is your hands. And so if you go back to this whole grid concept we talked about, and you look at going thousands of years back to these Vedic deities who have all these hands, but all these hands are arrayed geometrically around different areas of the body, right? So if this vibrational membrane is a two-way communication, and studies in biogeometry are telling us that human beings are constantly exchanging information with their environment vibrationally. We know that the spatial locations have vibrational significance to our autonomic nervous system, right? So the minute I place my hands in a certain spatial location, I tapped into a certain category of meaning and information in my vibrational field, right? If I put my hands in specific configurations, I change the neurological circuit pathways in my brain that correspond to these. Now, if all of my correspondences line up, I start to vibrate in resonance with the vibration and the intelligence that are correspondent to these mudras. And then if I have breathing exercises that allow me to expand and connect with my mental body, my astral body, and then the physical body, now everything lines up. I'm interacting with the whole of my being, and these pathways get energized. And if they get energized, they get more developed. And as they get more developed, they start to express higher attributes, higher phenomena. Most people don't have the patience or the understanding to line all those things up. And so I spent a lot of years deconstructing my versions of a lot of things. A lot of it was based on mudra work. My first exposure to mudras, believe it or not, was Reiki.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Actually, it was my second. My first one was actually ninjutsu. They have this these kuji hand positions, right? Called the Kuji In, which is a derivative of esoteric Mikyo Buddhist tradition, which is also derivative of Taoist esoteric tradition, which also goes back to India and Tibet. So all these things are they're doing the same things. There's slightly different meanings from system to system, but the hand positions are largely similar, right? So there's a strong body of interconnectedness there, which you don't need to know about, but understand that it is there. But when I was studying the martial applications, I ran across these in a ninjutsu book when I was 15, and I started putting my hands in these weird positions and nothing happened. But I remember thinking how cool that was because it was like martial magic, right? And so I kind of filed it away. But once I saw it, it was just like NLP and hypnosis. It always ate at me. It's like, I want to know how that works. And so I didn't really think much of it. Every now and then I'd go look at the books and try to figure shit out, especially when I got into the pressure point work that you saw me playing with and stuff like that. And I realized that this whole energy thing was actually real, right? And then I started paying a little bit more attention to that more esoteric side where I didn't have patience for it before. And then I walked into a Reiki class, and the first thing they did were these mudras. And I'm like, I've seen those before. And they were almost some of the exact same mudras I saw in the martial arts books. And I said, okay, there's a deep well. Let's see where it goes. And I got the Reiki bug, and I wanted to know more. And because now I've been indoctrinated into this belief that everything that made it to this country was held back, watered down, or mistranslated, I started looking below the surface to the roots. And as I got deeper and deeper into the roots, I found the incongruities, I found the inconsistencies, and I started looking for analogs in other systems. Right? You've heard me talk about my universal jigsaw puzzle model, right? Where every system on the planet that works is actually an incomplete jigsaw puzzle that has the same picture, but they're missing different pieces,
yes.
right? And if I can get enough incomplete jigsaw puzzles, assuming they all show a similar picture, I can find the parts that are missing and reconstruct a whole one. And so that's the metaphor that I applied to this, is that I know there's pieces that are missing, but this is working. What is similar? What are they doing what do they have that this doesn't? And I just kept finding those little radioactive Legos I kept talking about until I could eventually, in my mind, reverse engineer a system that allowed me to create a consistent phenomena. And that's what I teach.
So good. So good. I love that. Reiki and mudras are my next thing. I need you to teach a Reiki class. So I
actually put out some feelers not too long ago. If I taught a Reiki class, because I found actually that the Reiki attunement symbol that most people are doing from the original Usui system is missing a character. It's not complete. And when I found the missing character, people started channeling Chinese symbols that they were like ancient classical. It was very bizarre.
Oh my gosh.
It just, these things just come to you. And I think one of the reasons that things come towards me is because I keep sharing it. Because I believe information.
That's like the universe wants it.
I believe much like
hey.
the reptile brain wants to move the DNA forward. I believe the universe wants to move information forward. And so when it finds a conduit where there's an easier flow and less resistance to that information moving forward, it marshals resources in that direction. And so the more I share, the more I discover, the more this is my belief. I don't know if it's true, but it doesn't really matter what I believe because it keeps happening. And so the more I share, the more I get. So it's purely selfish on my part, but it's working in harmony with what the universe wants anyway.
Yes. And it's like, it's good to be aware that it's selfish because, I mean, in a good way, it's not like you're being around.
I call it enlightened selfishness.
Yeah.
And again, selfishness gets a bad rap, but again, there's two kinds. There's enlightened selfishness, and then there's asshole selfishness, right? Or as in a more appropriate way, the Kabbalistic way is desire to receive for the sake of the self alone, desire to receive for the sake of sharing, right? Either way, you're going to get something. The question is, how sustainable is it? Most people who have a desire to receive for the self alone usually wind up they reach their capacity, then they explode because the vessel can't hold any more energy and they try to put more in. Whereas if you have some apertures that allow that energy to be flowing through you, you're still full, but you can always receive more. And what happens is over time, as your neurology starts to channel more and more information and energy through it, just like going into the gym and lifting weights for a few months, you get stronger. Well, your vessel, which is the core of the hermetic training that we do, this whole continuum is able to hold a bigger and bigger charge. And so you gain capacity while at the same time not having stagnation and blockages and blowing a fuse.
Boom. Yes. Second to last question.
Okay.
Are you a superhero? Do you fight crime at night? Like, do you have the cape? Like, can you admit to this? Like,
I can neither confirm or deny that. I'm just a guy in a vest who shows up and does cool shit with cool people who like to do cool shit.
I love it. And if you're gone certain times of the night, maybe you're fighting crime. We'll just leave it to that.
Could happen.
Yeah. Can't confirm or deny. I totally get it. But what is there anything else you'd like to share?
There's so many things I would like to share, but a lot of the times my sharing is based largely on who's asking and what they want to know. And that's one of the things I think is a hallmark of our approach is, we have tons of information, but what do you want to know about? If there's something that's in our wheelhouse, we'll tell you everything we can and take you as far as we can in the time that we have to make that happen. I think the first thing is that without awareness, there is no choice. So regardless of where you're coming from, whether you consider yourself a yogi, whether you consider yourself a hermetic, a mystic, someone who's spiritual versus someone who's religious, the goal that we all have is to fulfill our mission in this life. We all come into this world with a higher purpose. The Taoists call that a golden path. I forget what other disciplines call it. The Chinese have a term for it. It's called Ming, which means destiny. And by getting on that path, by seeking to follow our joy and to become more than we currently are, and by sharing that in the right ways, we live longer, we get healthier, we get happier, we make more money, we get all the good things, but at the same time, we're elevating and raising up the people around us through the good works that we do. And so I think the most important thing that I can share is follow your joy, follow your passion, and ignore those voices in your head that when an opportunity arises for you, says, oh, it takes too much time. It's not worth it. It's too much money. It costs, it takes too long. When you hear those voices in your head, what it's really trying to tell you, and hopefully you'll reframe this now and really understand it's the part of you that wants to stay the same. And it's using anything it can to keep you the same because it's comfortable and it's familiar and the universe, and comfort zones are great places to be, but nothing ever grows there. And when those little voices rear their ugly heads and they tell you it takes too long, or it costs too much money, or it's not worth the effort, what they're really trying to convince you of is that you don't deserve it. And so the moment, if I walked up to you and said, you don't deserve to have everything you want in life, how would you feel? You'd be pretty pissed off, wouldn't you? Right? When you hear that voice in your head saying, it takes too long, it costs too much money, it's too hard, I want you to hear, you don't deserve it, and get pissed off and say, fuck you, I do deserve it, and I'm going to go for it. In whatever way that's appropriate for you. I would literally say, fuck you, I do deserve it, and go for it, right? Because, those of you know me know that the fastest way to get me to do something is to tell me I can't, right? You do deserve it. You deserve everything, every good thing that life has to hand you. But first, you must become the person for whom that thing can happen to. And sometimes that's, you've heard my old second payment metaphor. For everything you get from me, you're always going to pay twice. The first one is the money, right? That's the easy payment because you can always make more money. That first payment gives you access to the information. It's the second payment that decides where you go with it. And that payment is always time, energy, and effort to do the drills, to get the skills, to take things from access to ownership. And once you own it, the skills that you have will preserve you and take care of you in any situation where you actually choose to use them, provided you've made that second payment. And so remember, you deserve good things. You deserve to be the best version of yourself by your standards and expectations, not your family's, not your religions, not your schools, not your societies, but what makes you happy, right? And that's a lot of times is easier said than done, because there's a lot of people who feel threatened when you try to change, and you become that best version of yourself because it threatens it makes them look at their life from a different perspective, and they start to feel threatened, and they attack the things that threaten them, right? Yes, so become more self-aware. Remember, you deserve it, and remember when those voices rear up that are telling you it's too much money, or it takes too much time, or it's too hard of a work, they're trying to convince you to stay the same and that you don't deserve to have the change you say you want. No change comes without some level of discomfort, without some level of input and effort. So embrace the suck, as they say, and decide to move relentlessly forward and enjoy the ride, because it's not about the destination, it's the journey. And that's all I have to say about that.
Amen. Mic drop. Or AirPod drop, or whatever it is, the new technology. Thank you so much. And where can people find you? Where can people find you?
We have our current website is www.nlppower.com. Once again, that's www.nlppower.com. Third time, www.nlppower.com. There will be a brand new website coming up, but that particular URL will redirect to it at some point. And that new website will be davidsnydernlp.com. So I wouldn't worry about it just yet. And for those of you who want to, test drive the car before you buy it, go to our YouTube channel, David Snyder NLP at YouTube, and binge watch the free videos to your heart's content. Follow along, have some fun, participate in our webinars, our AMAs, and stuff like that. And if you have questions, call us and ask us. You can call my administrative goddess, Stephanie, who is absolutely awesome. And you can reach her at 858-282-4663. That's 858-282-4663. Third time's a charm, 858-282-4663.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm linking everything in the description. So if you didn't get it the third time, you're going to get it the fourth time. And you can go to the description right there. Check everything out. His YouTube is amazing. His classes are amazing. I'll probably see you in a class because well,
you've had killer influence. You've had killer influence. So you qualified to come to Hypnotic Presentation Skills on the 13th and 14th. So that would be fun for you, especially for you, because you do a lot of presentation work. And so I'm going to kind of pull back the curtain on all the things I know from Lisa Sasevich and David Singer and Dr. Richard Bandler, combined with a lot of the stuff that they don't teach you at presenter school. And we're actually going to deconstruct some of the high level NLP that has made it into some of the world's most powerful pitchmen's presentations, so that you can understand how they're working the mojo on you, and you can decide how to use it and deliver better services and things of that nature. So we'll teach you everything from how to create persuasion architecture, which is how to design a talk that primes people to want to just rush to the back of the room and buy everything, and still gives them amazing experiences and the user information that they can use right off the bat. You'll learn how to do small person presentations, how to do large group presentations. You'll learn how to use testimonials, how to build in subliminal triggers, how to use basic stagecraft, how to hold a microphone, how to set up audio. I mean, it's designed for my hypnosis therapy trainees and my hypnosis instructor trainees, so that they know the fastest way to build their business and leverage that content, either through podcasting or turning it into an article or turning it into a video blog post or whatever. So we're going to start from soup to nuts, and then just show you how to create the content, how to present the content, how to repurpose the content and leverage it. So that's, we're all going to, and we'll actually be putting you up on stage and having you do your intro and transitioning into your offer, and giving you actual feedback on it over and over and over again. So it's a smaller class. That's why it's an advanced class. So, but
it sounds terrifying, but it's something that I need. You know, whenever it's like terrifying to me, it's like, that's where I need to go straight to it. Yeah. You know, I definitely am coming to well, I have to make sure I can do it on my schedule, but the regression, I think I'm that type of stupid, like, or not
special kind of
stupid guy where, where they go to the, trauma. That's what I've been getting a lot. You know, I've just been getting the trauma and
a lot of people turn to yoga as a way to deal with their traumas, or a lot of times they come into yoga for completely different reasons and don't realize they're going to be running headlong into their stored trauma. So yeah, anytime you have some powerful ways to help them through it, it's just going to make your classes better, and people are going to have a lot more confidence and faith in following your guidance, which I think is important.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much, David, Dr. David Snyder, for coming on and chatting with me for the second time. I'll put the link for the Yogi show as well. That was just amazing knowledge and wealth of abundance that you shared there. So we'll link it all up. I appreciate you so much, and I'll be seeing you soon. I'm sure another time, twice, three times maybe.
I look forward to seeing you in person, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.